some new polling from NBC News shows nearly 75% of the country feels that we are headed in the wrong direction under President Biden, while just 21% feel that the nation is headed in the right direction. Meanwhile, 55% of those surveyed disapprove of Biden's job in office, while 42% approve. The poll also found that 58% of Americans feel worried that America's best years may already be behind us. Yikes.
Now, when it comes to Biden's handling of the economy, 56% of respondents disapprove of that very issue, according to the poll. 68% say the country is already in a recession, no matter what they're being told by the expert class. Now, host of Straight Shot, No Chaser podcast, Tezlyn Figaro, is here with us to discuss. Welcome, Tezlyn.
Thank you. Always glad to be here.
Glad to have you with us. So more bad polling news. It's just endless for the Biden administration. You know, what could they do to right the ship at this point?
I guess what difference would it make? Because they haven't been listening. The polls have consistently said over and over and over that people are not happy with the direction that this country is going in. But I want to remind folks, Joe Biden never ran on policy. Do anybody raise your hand if you remember him actually running on policy? He's always ran on healing America. If we really want to be honest about the fact of the matter, his one job and one job only, at least in his mind, was being a replacement for Trump. So folks weren't that excited about Joe Biden. Even folks who voted for him, those who were actually realistic and living in the real world, they never really expected much out of this president. Remember, he did have to run 3 times in order to win. And in order for him to win, they had to do quite a bit of finagling to get folks to get behind Joe Biden. So Trump was the reason why Joe Biden is in office. People weren't happy with him then. They're not happy with him now. And so what I would say, if they want to right the ship, the Democrat Party, they need to start getting a better bench and talk about what they're going to do in 2024. And Joe Biden needs to be honest about it and say, I'm not running again. I was there as a place filler. And let's move forward and see, who would be the next person on the bench that could probably take the country in the direction that the polls are begging them to do.
But isn't that person Kamala Harris? I mean, how could it be anyone else? There's no universe, I think, where she steps, despite the fact that she's not any more popular than Joe Biden. In fact, she's less popular. There's no way she steps aside for someone else, having been elevated to the vice presidency, having been prepared as Biden's successor. That's what I think, kind of throws some cold water on the idea that Biden's going to step aside at all, because if he steps aside, he's just stepping aside for Harris. And does that help the Democrats at all?
Well, I don't recall anybody saying that just because she's a vice president, that's automatically stepping aside for Joe Biden. I mean, Joe Biden was Barack Obama's president, and Barack Obama didn't step aside, for Joe Biden. So I don't look at the vice president as the next person up. It shouldn't be a job, if you will, where you promote from one position to the other. She would have to run just like anybody else would have to run. And you better believe he will be primaried in 2024 if he decides to run again. And I just don't think that he will. And it has nothing to do with his age. It just has to simply do with, this is something he's always wanted to do. He's always wanted to be president of the United States. He came in at the right time when folks were frustrated enough with President Trump. And so he took that opportunity. He barely got it. I know he won by a tremendous amount of votes, but when I say barely got it, I'm talking about got the Democrat nomination, period. South Carolina, Jim Clyburn made that possible. So it's really going to be up to who they want to have in leadership. And that does not automatically go to Vice President Harris. And she knows that. Anybody knows that you still have to run again, and you could possibly lose, just like Joe Biden did when he ran 2 times previously.
Tezlyn, you have your finger on the pulse now, really speak eloquently to the millions and millions of Americans who feel disgusted with both parties, who feel unrepresented by the political system writ large. I mean, what could the Democrats do, or the Republicans, in 2022 and 2024? What kind of a platform do you think would renew the trust of Americans like you who feel really alienated from both parties?
A platform that starts with not lying. a platform that starts with not volunteering lies that nobody asked you to do. That's been my frustration with Joe Biden. But Joe Biden has had a record that I've never been satisfied with, starting with the 94 crime bill. So I was never confused on the type of president that he would be. But when you talk about the platform as a whole, again, they have a lot of work to do. And it starts with delivering and having this elitist attitude of, oh, people are going to talk and the polls are what they are. And we're just going to continue to just act like none of this exists. That just builds more resentment and more people just completely falling out of the system as a whole. And in particularly when you talk about the midterms, now all of a sudden, wanting to ride on Roe versus Wade, thinking that that's going to be the savior for it all. President Biden came out and said that Roe versus Wade is on the ballot. It's not on the ballot, sir. In some states it's on the ballot, in some states it's not. That is not going to be the blanket that's just all of a sudden going to right the ship in the direction that people want to see this country going. People are very consistent and very clear when they talk about the policy that matters to them. And it's not across the board the same. You have Black folks who are talking about reparations. You have Black folks that are talking about small businesses. You have many groups across the board that are asking for things, healthcare, more opportunities for businesses to grow, and so on. And so if they continue to not listen, it actually hurts the local candidates, which is my concern. Local candidates who will feel the wrath of the large party that has hurt them. There's a primary going on tomorrow, in case folks don't know. A primary with city commissioners, county commissioners all over this country who are nonpartisan, who are not running under a Democrat or a Republican ticket, who will be hurt because people are just completely fed up and they have lost hope in this system, this two-party system that we're all having to be forced to deal with.
Well, I get the sense that so many voters, so many people in America are frustrated with the Biden administration, frustrated with their emphasis on certain things, Democratic policies, but maybe don't totally trust the Republicans or see some of these Republican candidates, these personalities who are still very in a Trump mold, reminding them of Trump themselves, who they don't like very much in Arizona, in Georgia. Dr. Oz is turning out to be a really terrible campaigner. The Republicans look to me like they're actually going to blow a huge opportunity in November. Maybe not. There's time for them to right their own ship. But what is your takeaway from seeing, Republicans having this big opportunity, but then now they're not polling as well in a lot of these races as they were expected to be polling?
Now, let me be very clear, and I have a lot of conservative friends who have spoke out about this, who are not Trumpers, who have always been frustrated before Trump about how there's been an opportunity to talk to other voters, particularly Black voters, because that's obviously what I speak the most about. And they've never taken the opportunity as far as we're concerned. I don't want to say never because that's an absolute, but for the most part of it, they haven't taken the opportunity. They've always had to talk to people about policy to win people over. And so now when people have to make a decision between Democrat or Republican, not being a Democrat or being critical of the Democrat Party like I have been does not mean that I'm going to automatically just choose the Republican Party or choose to be a Trumper. It doesn't work that way. Just because I don't want to date this guy doesn't mean automatically I'm going to date you. I'm looking for a new love. In the words of Mary J. Blige, I'm looking for a new love, a real love, and somebody that's actually going to take the time to keep their promises. So most folks, I believe, independent are like me, in the middle, non-party affiliated, voting for their county commissioners, voting for their city commissioners, voting for their state reps, voting for their local positions, and looking to that. And actually, that's really what we should be focused on. Those are the things that affect your everyday life. People who say, I don't do politics, I always remind them, you may not do politics, but politics most certainly does you. And so the Democrat Party and the Republican Party, to a lot of folks, are just trash. Let's just be honest about it, they're trash. So there's a lot that they have to do to build the bench. And I'm not so much concerned about what the Republicans are doing. I know people want me to be concerned about that, but 90% of my community votes for the Democrat Party. So I have to always look at what is affecting my community the most, and that's the Democrat Party. And so that's why I hold them more so accountable than I do Republicans, because they just bottom line just don't even do outreach at all, if we just want to be honest about it. I've never seen a Republican come to my church, come to my school, or mix and mingle with the folks that I engage with, and that has allowed Democrats to take advantage of my community because they have not had another option to choose.
That is one of the things that bothers me the most, is that the Democrats take Black voters for granted and the Republicans ignore them. And especially in this election cycle, when you have rampant crime, no border security, and a recession, right? All of these things that are impacting the Black community disproportionately, to not have the Republicans showing up and saying, we're going to get you the things you need. We're going to get you safe streets. We're going to get your kids into good schools. We're going to secure the border and protect working class jobs. Like, in this moment, if the Republicans are not showing up in the Black community and saying, we're not going to take you for granted, we're not going to ignore you anymore, then they deserve to lose as far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely. And guess what else? Democrats who continue to show up just around election time, they deserve to lose too. So I guess we're just going to see, how the chips fall, let them fall where they may. But there are many conservative policies. I won't say conservative, I'll say Republican, because there is a difference between conservative and Republican. I always try to let people know that. Small Black business, for example, when you talk about, opportunities to bring economics about the bag, if you will, to talk about that to the Black community. No, they don't talk about it. In the Democrat Party, particularly far left, they never talk about small business at all. They think that they can only run on social issues, and that's just not the case. And let me also say this: Black men are continuing to be ignored in the Democrat Party, and there you'll hear people say, oh, Black men have to vote and have to do better. Let me correct the record right now. They vote in large numbers. It's not about blaming the voter. It's about blaming the leaders that continue to come lie to the voters and then get lazy and do a piss poor job of keeping their promises, and we don't hold them accountable enough. And there should be consequences and repercussions for folks that continue to come to our community and lie. But what other option do they have if there's not another choice? I can't want to date you if you don't at least take me on a date at all. And Republicans just don't do that at all in my community.
Well, Tezlyn, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
And we'll be back with more Rising in just a minute.